should be all set. Awesome. Well, we can dive right in. This is our Copywriting for Food Businesses webinar. We've got Julius from Growing Hope here with us. We can jump into it, and then I'll give him a chance to introduce himself as well. So first of all, for anyone who's not familiar with Taste the Local Difference, if this is your first introduction to us, we're a local food marketing agency, and we work directly with farmers and retailers and specialty producers and really anyone in the local food scene who's selling or producing food locally. And we work on them with, anything they might need when it comes to support for marketing. So whether it's building a website or figuring out how to master social media or email marketing or designing branding, all of those good things. And we like to provide lots of free information to folks as well, because we know that not everyone can afford to pay for support and needs to just get what they need to try and do it themselves. So my name is Christina Marbury. I am the marketing director here at TLD, and my background is kind of all over the place, but I spent a lot of time in food systems, from managing farmers markets to teaching like cooking and garden education in schools. I used to help run a company that did locally focused school fundraising. So instead of kids selling cookie dough and candy, we sold apples and locally roasted coffee. It was really fun. And now I also have some marketing background, both from doing freelance work and working at a marketing agency that worked with more like bigger national brands. But I've been working directly with farms and food businesses for more than 4 years on their marketing efforts. And this is the industry that has my heart. So I love what I get to do on a day-to-day basis. And I will give Julius a chance to introduce himself as well.
Thanks. My name is Julius Buzzard, pronouns are he, him. I'm the executive director at a nonprofit in Ypsilanti, Michigan called Growing Hope. We do work within food and the food system here in Ypsilanti specifically, but across Southeast Michigan, really working towards creating spaces and a future where everybody has the ability to interact with food through equity, whether they're eating it, growing it, purchasing it, cooking it, or anything else. I've been here for about 3 years, and background in other spaces within the nonprofit sector, and also grew up on a farm with my grandparents.
Thanks, Julius. So I'm going to start going through kind of like not really brain dump, but a whole bunch of information. I'm going to walk through kind of some tips and tricks for copywriting for different pieces of marketing or communications work. And then there are some great examples from Growing Hope's marketing in there as well. And then we'll, at the end, have some time where we'll focus more on asking questions of Julius. So first of all, we're here to talk about copywriting. Sometimes that's a confusing term for people not necessarily understanding exactly what it means. We had somebody register who thought it was about copyright, not copywriting. If you're here, thanks for still coming. It's lots of great information, I think. So really, this is the craft of writing any sort of written content, copy, written words for your materials for your business or your organization. Most copywriting people approach it with the intent to persuade or inform or inspire people. So really thinking about how we can carefully tailor those words to our audience and also to whatever that next step we want them to take is. So we like to think of really good copywriting as being clear. It's easy to understand. It gets to the point. So it's concise. It doesn't always go, too long, although we'll talk about some cases where that might be a good option for some folks. And then it's compelling. It really tells people what you want them to do and encourages them to take that next step, whatever it might be, whether it's purchasing a product from you or donating to the organization or, getting an event on their calendar, lots of different things. So I always like to think of good copy in kind of these individual items, individual pieces. So it draws people in, it makes people want to keep reading, or it makes them excited about what you're talking about. So it can attract those donors or customers. It can build brand loyalty, so make people fall in love with your brand even more than they already are. And it can increase sales. So I like to think of it also as something that communicates care. The words that you choose to include in your writing can really show your intention, and they, can showcase your values, or if your business is really focused on, the detail and the quality of the products that you're making, by also being thoughtful and communicating that through the words that you choose, people are understanding that part of your business from many different angles. And additionally, it creates connection. For a lot of small local food focused businesses or organizations, part of the reason people like supporting local food is that they like to feel a connection to where their food is coming from. So by telling your story and sharing some of the background information about who you are and why you do what you do, it helps people feel more connected to your business, your organization on that emotional level. So I'm not going to read through this one all the way because it's a long one, an example kind of a more detailed post, but this is definitely, it's a post from Growing Hope about food being a basic human right and the importance of that in our lives and providing that to people who need it. So it's a really good example of a care-filled message that really gets down to the heart of things. All right. So when we're thinking about writing, one of the first things that I always encourage people to do is think about who their audience is. Who are you writing for? So depending how complex your communications or marketing strategy is, you might have just one channel where you're reaching everybody that you reach, and that is okay if you're in that place. But if you're to the point where you're sending different messages to different groups of people, it could be, certain messages that are going to your wholesale clients and certain messages that are going to your CSA customers or your regular customers, and certain messages that are going to, chefs that you work with who you provide produce or a product that you make to. They're each going to want to interact with your business in slightly different ways. So making sure to think about who it is that you're writing for, whether it is that segmented audience or whether it's the different place that that information is showing up on social media or email or your website. And we're going to talk through kind of writing for those different platforms a little bit. But despite potentially wanting to share different information and approach it a little bit differently, it is really important to try and identify a brand voice and tone. So the way that you talk about things, and keep that consistent across the board. So maybe, for a wholesale client, you're talking more about how you can make use of things in a restaurant or place them on retail shelves or things like that. And direct to consumer, you're talking more about like, I'm bringing this product into my home and how do you use it? But you're still maybe approaching it in a friendly way or in a, comical way. Different brands have different ways that they like to get their message across. So I'm going to dive in through some different channels, different areas that people tend to be writing content for, starting with social media. It's always kind of nice to understand who you're talking to on social. You can use the analytics in your social media accounts to determine a little bit more about who your followers are. If they're, women over aged 35 who maybe happen to be parents, or, you can kind of get a sense of their demographics of where they're located, their gender, their age, and that can help you to craft the right message for those people. So on social media, one of our first things that we always like to think about is, does your post include a hook? So is there something towards the top of the message that really drives people in? So in this example, there's a quote as the main thing at the top, the hook. People read it and are like, ooh, I'm excited. I'm interested in that. I want to keep reading. I want to find out what other information I can get here. When you're on social, for any of you who are commonly on social media, everyone is kind of scrolling through, and it takes something a little bit impactful to get people to stop and look at what you've actually written, take a closer look at your photo. So some people will, use something like that quote. You could ask a question at the top. You could take a little poll of your audience. You could use all capital letters or an emoji, but something to kind of grab people's attention and hold them in. Additionally, on social media, we like to think about how content that you're writing for your caption fits with the imagery, whether it's a video or a photo, making sure those things really fit together well, and they complement one another. And additionally, if you are going to put maybe some graphics as your image with some text in it, making sure that what's there and what's in your caption fits together. And you do also want to make sure you repeat anything that's in the image in your caption for the purpose of accessibility for folks who aren't able to read it, or you can include it as the alt text can detail the information that's in that image. All right. So that's kind of the gist of social media. Obviously, we could go far more detailed, but we only have 30 minutes, so we're given the overview here. When we think about website content, this is like the place where you have the most control. You know that when somebody comes to your website, they're able to see everything that's there. You don't have to encourage them to go from a social post to your profile to get more information. Generally, we know that people are there because they want to find out more about who you are and what you do, or engage with one of your offerings. So the number one thing that I like to think about on websites is making sure when somebody gets to your website and looks at your homepage, within 5 seconds or less, they can have a general idea of who you are and what you do. So Growing Hope, for example, has like a 1-sentence description of who they are as an organization at the top of their homepage, which is perfect. If you're a business, noting especially local food businesses where you sell, the general area, if it's Ypsilanti or Ann Arbor or Detroit, or I'm up in Traverse City, kind of the main area where you sell your product and what you sell. And if you're, organic or have some other clarifying pieces that you want to make sure people know about you, make sure to call those out at the top as well. So past that initial, please make sure people know what you do from the top of your website. I always like to think about being welcoming and informative and clear. Maybe you have that top piece that is quick to the point, here's who we are. And then as they scroll down, they start to learn more and more and get into more and more detail. We also like to make sure on our homepage that we're driving people to the other pages on our website. So maybe you have a little bit of an overview of different sections, you have a brief paragraph of what you're all about, and then a button that takes people over to your about page, or, a highlight of what products you offer and a button that takes people off to start shopping on the full shop that you have online. So thinking about kind of that flow of the user through your website. I also always like to call out the about page because it's something, for organizations, of course, but for businesses, I think a lot of businesses forget to share that story behind who they are and what they do and why they do it. And the about page is the perfect place to do that. As somebody who's an obsessive researcher before I make my purchases, and I think a lot of people who are into local food are the same way. I want to buy from a business who tells me what they're all about, not who you go to their website and it's just products and that's it. So making sure you make a point to tell your story, not just the products, but also why you do what you do and maybe how you got there as well. So this next section is more about product descriptions. So for anybody who is selling products online, be it, individual items that you're selling, or, CSA orders, or giving kind of descriptions of what you sell and then information about where to purchase it, those product descriptions can be really, really important in terms of appealing to those potential customers and giving them a reason to make that purchase. So always try to be descriptive, address their needs, and encourage them to take whatever that next step is to make that purchase. So this is an example from our website of a detailed description. So those bullet points, bolded items, you want to make sure that they call out, they see. But I also wanted to share something that I think can be really valuable for individual products like you guys may likely offer, which is adding like testimonials or quotes from your customers so that it's not just you telling them that it's a great product, but they see it coming from other people as well. If your online sales platform allows, you can also do customer reviews so that they can see, you know, a variety of reviews there. But if you don't have that functionality, even just putting in a few call outs can be really valuable. All right. The final thing that we wanted to call out when it comes to website copy is thinking about search engine optimization. So SEO can be is a huge whole other piece. We do have a webinar on our YouTube account that you can watch for a deep dive into SEO. But when we're writing website copy, I always recommend folks consider incorporating some keywords into the headers and the body copy, but not just like filling it with terms you want to show up in the search results for because you want it to sound natural and you want to address your readers' needs or your website users' needs, not just throw a bunch of keywords in there for the sake of them being there. Search engines have gotten a lot smarter over the last 10 years in terms of understanding when something feels like it's written by a human. Awesome. All right. So the final kind of like area of information is around email copy. So we do have, there's a screenshot here, but there's a blog on our website, localfoodmarketing.com, about writing subject lines, because subject lines are a really important piece of email copywriting. It's one of the biggest things you can do to encourage people to actually open your email. So having something that's a little bit catchy or that highlights really clearly what people are going to find inside of that email, that can be really impactful. I always like to tell people, think about what kind of emails you open. Often they're ones that come from people you know, businesses or organizations that you care about and want to hear what they have to say, or they've gotten you with a catchy email line. And sometimes that subject line can get people to open your emails, read about you, and then want to continue opening those emails from you. So instead of like August 27th newsletter, you know, it could be, we're harvesting the best tomatoes of the year right now. And people want to know, ooh, where do I get those tomatoes? In talking about this, we wanted to make sure we gave a little call out to AI because I know a lot of people are thinking about how they can use AI to make things easier on themselves. I always like to think of it as a support tool, not a doing the job for you tool, because it is pretty obvious usually if you've written everything with AI. So subject lines are one of my favorite things to use AI for. You can even put your email content in there and say, hey, can you give me some subject lines? And it will give you a bunch of options that you can take and edit a little bit, but a nice way to come up with like some fun ideas that maybe you couldn't come up with yourself. That's because headlines are my least favorite thing to write. But it can also be useful in like providing a template. So saying, I want to talk about this, give me a structure, and it'll give you an outline, and then you can follow the outline as you write it. Summarizing things or rewording something that maybe you write a sentence and you don't like how it comes out, you can put it in and say, hey, can you rewrite this in, you know, to make it clearer or something along those lines. Or always for drafts. I always say, if you're going to use AI, have it draft something and then take that and edit it to make it sound like you. So it doesn't sound just like it's spit out of a computer. All right, back to email. A few other things we wanted to call out about email. One of them is personalization. So I mentioned earlier on writing to your audience, whether it's, you know, your wholesale clients or your CSA members or your regular like one-off purchase customers. Email is a really great place to do that customization because you can, in your email marketing system, note where each of your contacts, like how they fit into your business. You can tag them different ways and then target those specific people with your email messages. And when you then make those messages highly relevant to the people who are receiving them, they're more likely to be excited to read your emails and engage with them over and over again. I did want to call out this one. We have a webinar that's on our YouTube channel called Email Marketing for Farmers Markets. It is very farmers market focused, but a lot of the information is relevant for anybody. But there are some really good email personalization examples in there of taking like one topic and how you can segment it out for different audiences. So if you're interested in learning more about that, this is a great webinar to check out on our YouTube channel. All right, and then the final thing when it comes to email is always thinking about calls to action. So if anybody's unfamiliar, a call to action is a ask of somebody to take a step. Generally in email or on your website, I think of them as buttons. Usually you want your call to action to be a button because it's bright and highlighted and people see it really easily and know that you want them to click there. But it could also be text that's linked. So always consider when you start an email, when you're looking at a web page, what do you want people to do after they read it? So, some examples from this video that scrolled through are like reserve your spot for an event or a class or something along those lines. Sign up to volunteer, give now. So those are great organizational calls to action. They could be, learn more or get your ticket to an event or, place your order online or save your spot in our CSA. But always thinking about not just putting information out there, but what do you want your reader to do when they read that information and making sure you make that clear for them. It's amazing how much something as simple as putting those calls to action in your emails can impact how effective they are. Awesome. I don't see any notes in the chat yet, but if anybody does have questions they want to call out, please feel free to put them into the chat. We are next going to ask a few questions of Julius and let him share some about how Growing Hope has approached writing for their organization. So first of all, Julius, I want to ask you, what do you keep in mind when you're writing for Growing Hope, whether it's your digital items or print materials? What are kind of the things that are top of mind as you write for the organization?
A lot of the things that you've pulled out in the past 20 minutes or so, but regardless of what it is that we're writing or that I'm writing, I always try to think about our voice and our values as an organization, and making sure that whatever we're communicating or whatever we're talking about in some way links back to our values is that we've decided are our values as an organization that are bigger than myself, but also relates back to our mission and relates back to equity and food justice and to um, a more equitable food system in Southeast Michigan and Ypsilanti, Michigan.
Awesome. This is a good follow-up from that, which is there a brand voice that you follow? Like, does Growing Hope have an identified way that you like to speak in your written materials? And if you do, how was that determined and how do you kind of bring that into your thought as you're writing?
Yeah, we had somebody who was here doing marketing for the organization before I started, who talked a lot about our brand voice, which was a new concept to me at the time. So for a little background, I have almost no background in marketing, but I like to write. So I've kind of been thrown into this. But really, it's like I said, thinking about um, what are our decided values as a collective, as an organization, and the way that we want to be heard, presented, and understood as an organization, as an entity, as that collective versus as an individual. So I think for me, in the things that I've written on behalf of Growing Hope, I have the luxury of we have a clear line. So we do our newsletters, and there's a part of our newsletter that I just realized I was not doing or could not do, or maybe just didn't want to do from a voice outside of my own. So anything where I feel like, this is something that Julius is saying versus something that I think Growing Hope wants to be the author of, or is the Growing Hope's voice. I put my own name on, even though 90% of the things that go out, I'm writing anyway. But just having that distinction, and then also being able to have that as guidelines for when other people are entering into those spaces, whether it's through, posting things on social media or writing things in our newsletters or anything else.
Awesome. I do think that the concept of a brand voice, we work with a lot of businesses that are businesses of one or maybe a couple that runs a business together. And it is definitely more important to really dive into your brand voice if you have a lot of people on your team and different people who are writing, to make sure that it comes together and feels cohesive. But you also can have a brand voice that is not your own voice, depending on the situation, right? Like you might have a business that you want to promote in a way that is not the way you talk every day, and that's totally okay. So as you think about brand voice, consider how you want your business to sound, and if that is your voice or if it is a slightly different voice, and how you can, identify the different ways that you speak about the business when it comes to, once you've determined what that is. Uh, I will say that I think we were excited to have Julius come and join because Growing Hope's messaging is incredible. And he doesn't have a writing background. And I think that's a good reminder that some people feel out of place doing things like this, if they don't have that background or don't have a marketing background. But you don't need it. You can figure out how to, do a really good job and take some tips and tricks into things and do a really good job, even if you're not, an English major. Um, so finally, we just wanted to ask Julius to share a success story. So sometime that you wrote something that you felt like the copywriting made an impact on how things turned out in the end.
Mm. Um, yeah, I think that I mentioned our newsletters, um, and in the past year or so, I've gotten a lot of primarily positive feedback around our newsletters, and thinking around, we've used them as a space to help us to talk more about how we are engaging with like the system part of the food system, um, and really making and encouraging some systemic changes, in our community. Um, and it's been, some of it's been like reflections from things happening in our community, having elected officials here on the farm. Um, Earlier this year, we had a series of things that went up that led up to, a forum we did in, maybe it was the beginning of March, with, I don't know, maybe four local Black farmers, um, which, I think both having the copy and doing the storytelling beforehand, which each of that pieces was a story from each of the farmers who were going to be a part of the, webinar, um, really helped us to have both like a base level of knowledge as people were coming into the webinar, but I think it also helped us to have a really deep conversation about food and the food system, and specifically around, what it's like, what it's been like, what needs are of Black farmers in our community, even in light of various pieces of support coming, in different ways throughout our community. And it also got a lot of people just really deeply interested in, that part of the work that we're doing. And it's not even necessarily, that people are, it did acquire new donors, but I think what is more of a success to me from this is the number of people who followed up with me with other ways of wanting to like support or be engaged, whether it's like, how can I like actually support Black farmers in, wherever I live, like help me find those people, or like, I heard from a number of people who started reading various books, or sending me articles, or just like really deeply engaging with the topic, um, which I thought was successful.
Yeah, that's a really great example in a way that you can take one thing that you're doing and use the communications about it to make it even into something even bigger, and really bring those people out of the woodwork to think about it in a deep level. So thanks so much for sharing. We really appreciate having you here, Julius. We always love doing work with Growing Hope, no matter what it is. I just have one quick last slide to share. Thank you everyone for coming. We do, as I mentioned, put all of our webinars up on our YouTube channel. So there's some pieces here that you can find there of other webinars we've done this year. And then the next one we have coming up is going to be about lead magnets, which is like a download or a promo or something that you can offer to encourage people to sign up for your email or engage with your business in another way. So we'll be chatting about that in September, and keep an eye out for an email for registrations for that. If anybody has questions or anything they want to bring up with us, feel free to shoot me an email at christina@localdifference.org. Or also Emily, our media and media and marketing manager, will be sending out the recording after this webinar, and you can feel free to even just respond to that email if you have any questions or follow-up items you want to share with us. Thanks everyone for coming, and big thank you to Julius for being here. All right, bye-bye.
Thank you for having me.